Economic trouble is coming. We are likely to see millions and millions of people across the US and the UK struggling across the next 6 to 12 months. Now, a lot of this is driven by the economic situation currently, but also with the prospects of the tariffs, the global trade war, the uncertainty. It all plays a factor. So, what lies at stake for the future of both America and for Britain? This includes things like price increases, tax rises, health restrictions, job layoffs. There is so much that could happen over the next 6 to 12 months, and we'll take a look at everything, both what's happening today and what we can look ahead to in the future. So we'll take a look at all of this, but before we do, it takes just 2 seconds. If you enjoy this video and you enjoy these kind of updates, please do consider hitting the like and subscribe button down below. And without further ado, let's get into it. So it can't have escaped anyone's attention that recently, President Trump has announced a sweeping set of tariffs on what he has described as Liberation Day.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple, can't get any simpler than that.
And for a country like the UK, the baseline rate that has been set is 10%. What that means is all goods that are produced in the UK that are exported to the US will now face a 10% additional charge that is basically a tax to the US government. Now, what you need to understand here is that this is just the beginning. I've said this for a couple of weeks now, and this quite literally is only the start of what the Trump administration could and will do for the future. You know, we've already seen the tariffs come into effect for China, and as you can probably tell by the headline, we're already seeing issues there, with China imposing what they're calling 34% reciprocal tariffs on imports of US goods in retaliation for Trump's actions leading to this trade war. But for a country like the UK that is on the receiving end of these tariffs, what does that mean for the UK economy? Well, take a listen to this.
Trump's tariffs could be worse for Britain than you'd think, and I can prove it with these. Imagine you're a British company, hypothetically making something like this from Warhammer. All your production's here in the UK, plus a decent chunk of your customers. But you also sell a lot to the US. In fact, they're your biggest market. Thanks to Donald Trump's new tariffs, the companies you sell to in America will have to pay the US government 10% every time they buy one of these figurines. If that's passed on to consumers as higher prices, you could lose some of these American customers. And that's not an accident, by the way. The president actually wants Americans to stop buying from foreign countries like Britain and switch to US-made products. Now, maybe it's just a small loss in America. Hopefully, most of your customers are dedicated and willing to pay a bit more for your products. But what if it's catastrophic? What if it's what economists call high elasticity of demand, where a small rise in price pushes loads of customers away? What next? You could try and make that money back by ramping up the price you charge to British customers. That might work, but it could mean you're losing business there too. Or maybe you keep the same prices and swallow the cost. That's better for your British customers, but someone else loses out, the UK government, because smaller profits for you means fewer taxes for them. And if you keep cutting into your own margins, does your whole business just collapse? So yes, American companies will only have to pay 10% import British goods, and that's a lot less than they'll pay on EU and Chinese products. But we'll still feel the downsides here.
Well, that sums it up perfectly. There will be an economic shock that is felt in Britain, and it's no surprise that the government is already making contingency plans in case the UK economy starts to contract. Look at this. Tax rise warning, as Trump tariffs could plunge the UK economy into recession. The Chancellor Rachel Reeves may have to suspend fiscal rules due to the impact of a possible trade war, which is no surprise because, as alluded to in the previous video, if Americans are no longer buying British products, then that's less money in the UK economy, equaling less money for the UK government. And that's looking to the future. But the problem is, the UK government has already increased the business rates. Employers are already being forced to pay more in national insurance, also known as health insurance for any Americans watching. Look at this. National insurance hike comes into effect with warning on jobs and price rises. Another headline: warning of job cuts and price rises after national insurance hike. The tax increase comes as businesses are also dealing with a 6.7% rise in the minimum wage. So the costs are increasing. Now you can imagine, in what's already a pretty stressful situation for the UK economy, with businesses having to pay more on taxes, if they're being forced to offset that cost by pushing up the prices of the goods and the services they're selling to the customers, then of course, UK citizens will have less money in their pockets. But what wasn't mentioned in that article was which type of taxes could be set to increase over the coming months. Because now, if they raise personal income taxes, all of a sudden, the British people will get further and further squeezed out. Meaning, less money in the UK economy, less economic growth. Britain essentially goes further and further into itself and retreats into a weak economy on the world stage. But let's wait and see what happens. If the UK can negotiate a trade deal with Trump's administration, who knows? Maybe these tariffs could be eliminated or significantly reduced to kind of mitigate the impact that would be felt on the UK economy with less Americans buying British-made products. But now, let's have a look at what this would mean for the American economy and for the American people. Well, granted, it could be seen that more money remains in the US economy because, of course, if Americans don't purchase products from overseas, then they don't send that money overseas, meaning it stays within the United States. So from that standpoint, I get it. The problem is how far this goes, because America, at this moment in time, is not completely self-sufficient. They are still reliant on other countries in trading terms, whether that's fuel, energy, food, technology, services, whatever it may be. That is where the problem is. But just have a look at what the Trump White House is planning. It says the White House are considering a roughly 20% tariff on most imports. Now, while this isn't confirmed, multiple reports and multiple expert opinions are saying if the US government follows through with a 20% tariff on every single good that comes into the United States, that could bring in up to $6 trillion worth of revenue. That's a massive amount of money. And you take into account what Doge is doing with trying to save money, it also gives the US government the chance to earn more money. Now, what they do with that is entirely up to them, whether they hand that out in stimulus checks, in paying off the deficit, paying down the national debt, again, entirely up to them. But as a revenue source, it could be a stroke of genius. And I alluded to it at the start of this video. What we're seeing happen now is just the beginning, because the end goal for President Trump and for his administration is for the tariffs to eliminate taxes on a federal level. That's the end goal. But it's not just the tariffs that are responsible for causing the economic trouble in the United States. The US government is also on a mission to save money. And one way that they're going about doing that is by laying off thousands upon thousands of federal workers. Look at this. Thousands of workers at nations' health agencies brace for mass layoffs. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't work for the federal government. I'm completely immune to what's going on here. I don't work for the health agencies. I don't work for any other government agency. I'm completely immune to what's going on here. Well, not so much. It's not just the health agencies. Look at this. Federal workers get second Musk buyout offer. It's not going out to all government agencies, but many of them are receiving a second buyout offer, basically as an invitation to take the money and walk away. Now you may still be thinking to yourself, well, again, how does this impact someone like me? How does this impact someone who's not directly involved with the federal government in any way? Well, think of it like this. Let's say you have a small coffee shop right next to a federal government building. Now, during mornings, lunch breaks, after work, people from the federal government, workers from the federal government, are popping out to the coffee shop, ordering coffees, and going back to work. That local coffee shop's business will be booming because there's a ready, willing, able to pay customer base right on his doorstep. So quite frankly, he's happy. He's raking the money in, which is great. All of a sudden, you have thousands of federal workers in that very government building laid off, or they have accepted Elon Musk's buyout offer. Now, you have fewer customers, so your business takes a hit. The coffee shop is not as busy as it was before, because now there are fewer people visiting, fewer people spending money, fewer people ordering coffee. Now, the coffee shop is not directly involved with the federal government, but the coffee shop has still felt the impact of all the workers getting laid off. And that's without even talking about the impact on the labour market, because all of a sudden, you have thousands more workers applying for positions, meaning they have more experience, they're more likely to get the interviews, they're more likely to actually meet with the employer, and those with less experience, or those, for example, who have just graduated from college, they're now the ones who are getting squeezed out. Because now, with this larger labour market, they don't stand a chance of even getting a look through the door. And on top of that, because you have more workers laid off, they're less likely to spend money on more luxurious things, whether that's clothes, handbags, shoes, or even traveling. Think about it, tourism. If you have less money in your pocket and you have to choose between the bare essentials, the utilities, food, water, gas, or go traveling, you're likely to opt for the option which is survival as opposed to luxury or a leisure. So, at the end of the day, whether you are directly or indirectly involved with the federal government, you will feel the impact of this. We are likely to see some major changes going forward, and I will do my very best to keep you all up to date on this as much as possible. So to that end, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Drop a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the whole situation. I'd love to hear from you. I'll be returning soon in the coming days and weeks, but until then, see you all later and take care.